We'll get started. All right, guys, we're going to get started. We still may have people pop in and out of the meeting. Right now, you guys are all on mute, but you can unmute yourselves or you can type in the chat box. Nate's going to be watching the chat box, so hopefully we won't get any questions missed. And feel free to interrupt at any time and ask questions as they come up. And then this is being recorded, and we'll post it to a folder that we'll share out with you guys afterwards. So yeah, we'll get started. So we're actually going to start with a poll. What do you think Gen Zers, and when we're talking about Gen Zers, we're looking at 13 to 22-year-olds. So a lot of our seniors this year are Gen Zers. What do you think they would do if they were given $500? Let me open the poll. So go ahead, there should be a poll up and vote. Awesome. So you guys have it split between save it and spend it. And you guys are actually right. The majority of students, 13 to 22 said they would save it, and 11% would say they would save it for college. And so when we're looking at that Gen Z population, they're already thinking about the cost of college and the impact that could have on their lives. And then 32% said they would spend it, which might be what I would do too. So we had asked you guys to respond to Enoch's story. And so if we go to the Padlet, in case you weren't able to watch Enoch's story, it kind of shows him going through the college process and how finances played a part. He got a full ride because of a scholarship, but he still had to take out loans for tuition and board. And he had a family discussion. Sorry, guys, I have the crud. About how many loans to take out to meet his needs. And then we get to see him in college struggling to feed himself because books and stuff cost too much. And he even goes to his financial aid officer, and they were not very helpful. So we'll look at some of your guys' responses. So as you can see, I was stressed out watching this, so I can only imagine how much stress Enoch was feeling. I was also very stressed out watching for him. Watching the video, I could definitely feel the stress Enoch was feeling as he made decisions along the way. I could really relate to Enoch's experience. Well, a lot of you kind of resonated with that, like feeling what the student's going through and how like we need to keep that at the forefront of what we're doing this year with our students and scholarships. And I think that dynamic we saw with Enoch's family is probably a really common one that our students are having. The how much money do we take out? How do we know how much to spend? You know, they talk about like $2,500 is a lot of money if you don't have money. So what are some of your guys' thoughts that you want to share with the group about that? Or what are some concerns you guys have for your students? And again, you can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat box.
I think so many students just don't know where to always find scholarships. So at Roosevelt, I've kind of created like a little packet of information that has a whole bunch of scholarship search engines on there. But then I've even found like as students, as I give that to students, are like, okay, so what's next? So just kind of walking them through that process of like creating an account and searching and spending like 30 minutes every single week. So yeah, I just think a lot of students aren't sure what that scholarship process looks like.
I think that's a really good point. It can be really daunting because there are so many scholarships and you may only like qualify for like 5% of them. So if you see 30 scholarships that you don't qualify for, it can be really daunting. So I think that's a good thing you bring up, Amber.
Matt said that one of his fears or worries is that students won't take the time to learn about where they can get some of that scholarship matter or that scholarship money, no matter what is put out there for them.
Yeah. I think that's a common trend, and speaking personally, that was definitely like, I put almost no effort into looking for scholarships that weren't offered through my institution or through the FAFSA. And that's part of the reason, like, it's so great we have coaches and counselors here that are trying to help them through that process. So we really appreciate you guys being on the call. Any final thoughts on Enoch's story? The personal statement documentary is a really good one. You can rent it or buy it off of Amazon for just a couple dollars. Or if you're one of my people, we can schedule time to watch it together. So if you can watch the whole thing, I would recommend it. So we talked about Enoch's story and kind of where we see students stressing, but what percentage of students do you think stress about their finances? I'm going to put up a poll. So go ahead and vote. What percentage of students stress about finances? All right. And it looks like most of you say 70%, and you guys are right. Oops. So 70% of students stress about finances, which is the majority of students across the board. But when we're looking at our populations, especially the Gear Up schools that come from majority of free and reduced lunch, I can only imagine that would be higher. And then one last question, or two last questions. What percentage of community college students are homeless, and what percentage of community college students are struggling to eat? Let me open that poll up for you guys. For the person who just joined, we're talking about the impact of the cost of college. And right now we have a poll up about what percentage of community college students are homeless and what percentage of community college students are struggling to eat. Leave it up for just a second longer. All right. So you guys said that the majority of you said 13% of community college students are homeless, and you guys are kind of split between students that are struggling to eat, between 70 to 90% or 20 to 40%. And you guys were right on the money with those. So 13% of community college students are homeless, which is a huge number. And where we're looking at our students, a fair amount of our students are going to be going to community college. And then what percentage of community college students are struggling to eat? That 20 to 40%, which is a little bit higher than like our state average for food security. So as we're having this scholarship conversation, it's really important that if we can help our students cover the cost of their tuition and hopefully their room and board and books, then what they do have on the side can go towards housing and food and that sustainability piece. It's really hard to focus on your education if you are worried about if you have a roof over your head or food in your stomach. Any questions about those? When you guys get the PowerPoint, it'll have the articles where I got these statistics from, so that you can see that and see more about just the different security issues around education. All right, so Matt had brought up, and it's really common for us to hear from our students that like all the reasons why not to search for scholarships or not to do scholarships. And so here I have a few examples of them. And it's really important as us as counselors and coaches and professionals in our students' lives to kind of reframe the conversation they're having with themselves. And so if we kind of go through this, it's so much work for so little. And so a lot of students think that that time and investment isn't worth what it's gonna, the effort they're gonna put into it. And so if you're looking at a $15,000 college bill for your first year, $500 may not seem like a lot. But if you help them rephrase it and be like, if you spend 5 hours on scholarships and only get a $500 scholarship, you would have made $100 an hour, which is really good money for an adult. And you can reframe that anyway from like $1,000 or whatnot, but kind of reframing like, if you're looking at it as pay per hour of work you're doing, it is a lot for what your effort is. My grades are too bad to get a scholarship. A lot of our students have academic insecurities that their GPA is too low or their test scores aren't high enough. And while some scholarships, a lot of scholarships have like a minimum GPA or a minimum test score, a lot of them don't, or a lot of them are flexible that if you aren't quite there, you should still apply. And so helping them find scholarships that don't require a GPA or ACT test score of a certain can help, but also sitting down and having a conversation with them of like, yeah, you're almost there. Like they need a 2.5 and you're like a 2.4. So maybe you still invest a little effort and they can see your tenacity and the strength of your character. Because a lot of times scholarship boards, they want to see the student as a whole. They want to get to know the student and know their character more so than just their GPA or their test scores. My family makes too much money for me to get help. One, for the Gear Up schools, we all know that it doesn't matter how much they make, they'll still get the Gear Up scholarship. So file those FAFSAs.
Right.
But there's tons of merit-based scholarships that don't take in financial need. So whether it's how high you are in your class, your GPA, community service scholarships are plentiful. If they spend a lot of time dedicating volunteer efforts or leadership positions, that can really make a big impact. And there's lots of scholarship money out there for students who do that type of thing. They want leadership skills, and I haven't participated in anything. For a lot of our students who have like needs at home where they have to take care of their family members, or because of different circumstances, they can't be in sports or different clubs and whatnot, they may feel like because they weren't involved, they won't qualify for things, especially like leadership skills or character-based scholarship. But you need to just kind of help them realize that their story and what they do to serve their family or their church or whatever it may be is leadership skills in itself, and really just helping them sell their story. I'm terrible at writing. They won't pick my essay. I think this can be a really common trend, especially like if they're not doing well in like their English classes and stuff. But there's lots of scholarships that don't require essays, video submissions. There's scholarships out there that are like art portfolios or web design things. But I would also have you guys encourage them to, yes, do the essay part, but maybe also in conjunction, send a video essay along with it, so that they can really sell themselves in the way that they're comfortable. Again, these scholarship boards are wanting to know the student more so than necessarily whether or not they check the right boxes. And finally, what is the point? I won't get anything anyway. You're right, you may not get anything. That's the sad part of it. I know our students are amazing, but a lot of times you don't get the scholarship you applied for, but you have more of a chance of getting extra funding for scholarships if you try than if you don't try at all. And not that I want to support the lottery, but you can't win if you don't play. So kind of selling it to them that way. So what questions do you guys have around this, or what are your thoughts? Are these common things you guys are hearing from students? Again, you can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat box. Yeah. Oh, Carmen's going to say something now.
I just was going to speak the one that my grades are too bad to get a scholarship. I think that really resonated with me. And, you know, I've heard students say that. And I think we've talked a lot about students being able to tell their whole story. And this is an opportunity when they're applying for scholarships for them, as you said, to kind of allow the institutions to get a good idea of who they are as a whole. And this opportunity is one where they can recite their story, because their story is what's going to, you know, give them power. It speaks to some of the struggles they've been through and things that they have overcome. So I think that's a great opportunity for them to kind of have an inward inflection with that, and then be able to sell their story in themselves. So I think that there's more than one benefit to applying for scholarships and being able to talk a little bit more about who they are aside from the grades.
Absolutely.
Then Amber said, oh, go ahead, Meredith.
I just wanted to add a comment. I just came from the National Scholarship Providers Association National Conference, and the part about leadership skills, when I haven't participated in anything, was actually a big topic, running through several sessions of different scholarship providers that provide national scholarships and small local ones, talking about how to reframe their questions in their applications to capture exactly what this reframing is, that they're not just looking for traditional leadership skills, but they're looking for the impact or the skills utilized or the development of the student into those leadership roles, whether that's through working to help support your family, that all of that is considered into there. So I just want to reiterate that reframing from the lens of people who award the scholarships, that's definitely sought after and desired, and trying to reframe then the questions to better capture that. So know that that is what a lot of them are looking for when they're looking through those applications, is exactly that reframe you've highlighted.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith. And for everyone, Meredith is from Bright Scholars, and she will be talking with you guys in just a few minutes.
Then Amber had something to say. She said, I would say it's pretty common here at Roosevelt, especially the leadership skills aspect. I always try to point out other factors that the students could highlight. Amber continues by saying, I always encourage students to spend a minimum of 30 minutes a week looking and applying for scholarships, essentially making it a part-time job. You never know what you might win if you don't at least try. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like your goal of like just 30 minutes a week, because it feels really manageable. Any other questions or comments? Or are there other things that we don't have on here that you hear your students saying? All right. If you're thinking of anything, don't hesitate to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. The next thing we're going to talk about are resources for helping students with scholarships. And I know a lot of your schools are doing stuff where in their English classes, they're working on essays, or as coaches and counselors, you help your guys or your students on stuff. But I did want to talk about a few options that could help your students with their scholarship process. First is Story 2. Story 2 is specifically built to be, sorry guys, okay. Story 2 is specifically meant to help students write compelling essays. And they have a really neat process of asking guiding questions, and then they have a transcription process where the student can talk their essay out for their initial draft. So they can just talk about whatever situation they're writing about, whatever experience they're writing about, and it will transcribe it into a rough draft for them to edit. And so this could be a really good resource that, like, if you're going to sit down with a student and like help them with an essay or something, have them do this as prep work, and they can bring that transcribed essay as a starting point. For Gear Up students, they actually have access to this free for the whole year. you can click on that bit.ly link and they can create an account. And so whether it's college essays or scholarship essays, this is a resource for them. For video essays, all of our students are so tech savvy now. I'm sure they're very skilled at like creating a video, but if they're not, or they need some like extra video editing help, Shotcut is one of the free video editing softwares out there. It's web-based, so they can upload their videos and then like cut them into different ways. They have transitions, you can add text to it. So if they're hoping to make their videos pop out a little bit, that could be a really good resource for them. And then I will click on this. So a lot of times with the scholarship process, there may be interviews. And so it could be an on the phone or in the person interview. But this was just one of the many articles you can find out there to kind of like help them prepare for the interview. So it talks you through common interview questions. With you as a professional counselor, coach, or whatnot, you can walk them through these together. You could have them practice on their own and then have them go through their own interview process, and really helping them focus on not having one story that they reiterate over and over again, but like having them have several stories that they can pull from. So if we look at this, tell us about your greatest strength. What are like 3 different things you can talk about to showcase that? And as we're preparing our students for these conversations, if the better prepared they are with those stories, when they're nervous and anxious about the interview, the easier it's going to be to have them pull up that information to help them recall it in the interview. Cool. Do you guys have any resources that you guys use with your students?
Matt said that they do mock interviews for their students.
Awesome. Do you partner with anybody for that, Matt?
Guidance counselors, it looks like.
Oh, awesome. And I mean, you guys are all so well informed on all this stuff, but like it can be really helpful if you're preparing a student for a scholarship interview, having the scholarship requirements pulled up so that you can see what they're kind of wanting. If it's a, adversity scholarship and they're talking about how much fun they had over the summer, probably not the most appropriate. So having those scholarship requirements up can be helpful. Any other things you guys do to help students prepare for scholarships?
This is Amber at Roosevelt. It's not really anything that we do per se, but one of the things that I found online was encouraging students to create like an Excel document where they track everything. So then they can put the scholarship in there. When is it due? What is due? Like, what do they have to turn in with each scholarship, and just kind of helpful pieces for each thing. And then that way it's all in one place and they're not hunting all over for what did I apply for and where is that, and kind of things like that.
That's a really good idea. Would it be helpful for us as your guys' facilitators if we kind of mocked up like a demo Excel spreadsheet so that you could just share it with students?
I think that would be really helpful, because I've kind of given them the idea of like what they could include in that. But I think it would be super helpful that if there was like a template already created for them, then we could just kind of pass it on as we're working with students that are doing scholarships and say, hey, use this after we're done meeting, and then next time you come back, we can kind of see where you're at on things.
Perfect. Can do easily, Amber.
It's a good idea.
Any other resources or ways you support students with applying for scholarships? If not, Meredith, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. Awesome. So for anyone on here that I don't know, my name is Meredith Dohmen. I used to be the counseling coordinator and student support coordinator for Des Moines Public Schools. I'm a former high school counselor, elementary counselor, and now work with college students as a scholarship provider. So just as a quick overview for our scholarships, they're funded by the Bright Foundation, which is the private foundation I work for. Our statewide award is called Bright Scholars of Iowa, and that is available at the University of Iowa, Iowa State, and UNI, as well as DMAC, Indian Hills, and SWIC. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not available at DMAC right now. Indian Hills and SWIC also. And those scholarships are all full cost of attendance scholarships after any other grant aid is applied. So we'll talk a little bit about just what the general funding formulas of all scholarships too in a minute. And then we also have another program for those of you in Des Moines called the Lois Dale Scholarship. And for that scholarship, students apply through their home high school, and they can then choose to attend any of those partner schools. So Iowa, Iowa State, UNI, also DMAC for that one, SWIC, and Indian Hills. So that's a little bit just about where I'm coming from as a scholarship provider now, and going to share with you just a little bit about how scholarships can then fit in with that big piece of the puzzle and some things to look for, as well as where to find them. Sorry, I forgot. Gracie, can you go ahead and go forward?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about, where to find some scholarships and how to piece them together. Okay. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as background language, I'm not going to go into these, but I'm guessing you guys are familiar, versed with like the sticker price versus the net price of schools, meaning the sticker price of what the schools publish as their cost of attendance, so the tuition fees, room and board, and all of that, versus the net price, which is how that sticker price often gets reduced, even through institutional aid that the universities offer, kind of along with, you've been admitted, here's your financial aid.
Is there a way to get her to control to click?
Then types of aid, that grants and scholarships are things that don't need to be paid back. That work study is a federal program that has some regulations that universities can include that as part of their award package. And then loans are things that need to be paid back. And then also the expected family contribution that students get by completing their FAFSA, which shortened to the EFC, which is supposedly what families can afford and should be paying for their students' college, which we know is not always actually the amount of cash available to said students to help fund their college, but that's the formula that's used in calculating need. So that's just the background knowledge. Does anybody have questions on those things? I'm guessing that's not new content for anybody. Okay, we can go on to the next one, please. Okay, so when we're looking at putting together how the financial aid package comes together and where scholarships are included, knowing these different parts of the cost of attendance becomes really important, because a lot of the scholarships have restrictions around what they will or will not cover. So also we'll look a little bit too at some of the aid letters and how some of those scholarships come in those aid letters. I find those can be really confusing for students, even as they try and do that. So the direct costs are what will be on the actual like U-bill from the school. Tuition and fees, it's a room and board if they're living on campus. DMAC's a little tricky because they don't actually have on-campus housing, but it's so connected as part of the student experience if anyone's living into that off-campus housing there, but it's all considered off-campus. Then the indirect costs are those books, and then also transportation and personal expense allowance. So most schools will write that up. Usually most of the schools in Iowa, it's around $2,300 right now for what that transportation and personal expense combined allowance is. So when we're looking at scholarships and how to piece together that financial aid package, it's important to make sure all of those things are included when looking at the cost of attendance. As we'll see later, award letters sometimes piece those together differently, so you have to do a lot of math. And then where the EFC comes into play is a lot of quote unquote need-based scholarships aren't necessarily about what the actual EFC is. It's about the difference between the total cost of attendance and the EFC. So one of the things that makes our scholarship program unique is that we cover that EFC. So if we are not, then even though you have to have a certain income threshold to qualify for our scholarships, if you don't have financial need because your EFC is $7,000 and you have your whole cost of attendance except that $7,000 covered, they would say you don't have any need, but we would then pay that $7,000. So that's where you stack those things to come in. Okay, we can go on to the next one, please. And I'm just gonna go with what Gracie said earlier, just unmute and interrupt me any point in time if you have questions. So the things to look at is a lot of scholarships will be restricted to tuition fees and books only, or tuition and fees only. A lot of that comes from private scholarship providers because technically any scholarships received for room and board and personal expenses are considered taxable income to the student. And so a lot of people are worried about, oh, I don't want to give a student something that they're going to get taxed on. And that comes in, I'm not going to go too far into the whole tax issue, but that's just, I guess, the background as to why we don't ever give any financial advice, tax advice, all of that. They can ask through their financial aid office if students have questions about that, but it's something that they're just supposed to report. Yes, I received scholarships in this amount towards room and board or things like that is my understanding. But I do think that's why a lot of people restrict those scholarships. Being careful also when getting those letters. I've had a lot of students you need to look at what the full cost of attendance is and what the total of the aid is and do the math. I had some students last year that were seniors in high school looking at their letters saying, Iowa State's my dream school, but Iowa offered me more money. But when you did the math, they actually were going to end up having to spend the same amount of money. It was because the costs at Iowa were higher than the costs at Iowa State. So helping students really look to see the impact of scholarships and what they need to try and piece together to get as much as possible to fund that college education. And so then also knowing that those cost of attendance on those letters covers some fixed expenses, and sometimes there can be savings possible. So if students are saying, oh, I didn't get enough scholarships to cover this, looking at how they can kind of piece that together a little bit more. And then the last thing with those scholarships to look at is piecing together that full cost of attendance. Just a question to keep in your head. This is getting more into like the selection time versus or when they're trying to make their decision about where to go. But being aware of something called award displacement. So that if they're starting to get a lot of scholarships coming in and covering those full costs and meeting their full need, they may need to ask the financial aid office, will any of my aid from you be reduced if I get other scholarships? And that's just an important question to ask along the way. So we can go on to the next one. So this is using very round numbers because of course we don't have those at most schools, but just to make it easier to look at how you can piece together a financial aid package and the leverage that scholarships can provide. Using round numbers that are pretty close to what some of our state schools are in Iowa, you can see on the left then what the cost of attendance would be. Totaling $21,000 with those direct fees. Say this is a freshman living on campus, they'd have about $18,000 of that would be due directly to the university for their tuition fees, room and board. So their EFC from this example is $5,000. So they would still qualify for a Pell Grant, not the full Pell, but a little bit. So on the right side is what maybe they might get in a financial aid package from a university. There's a little bit of merit aid, some need-based aid, federal grants, state grants. So they're getting a total of $8,000. So they almost have their tuition covered, but they still have unmet need of $8,000. So that would be the cost of attendance minus their EFC at 16,000. Now they've got 8,000 in gift aid, so the balance of need is still $8,000. So if that's kind of their target, is not just that 8,000 in need, but also covering that 5,000 in EFC as best they can to try and grab more scholarships, that they then would have those other scholarships coming in, like the 5,500 just being different hometown scholarships that they would report in, or maybe some national scholarships too, how they can piece that together, and it can make a big difference, not just through the aid that they get from the university. But in this example, like their outside scholarships are now more than their unmet need. So that's where they would have to be checking with the university, because the university could reduce some of that need-based aid up above, which would make their outside scholarship total would be 9,000, but it's still going to leave that EFC of 5,000 and won't reduce that necessarily. So that's just why, I guess, to be aware of that. We can go on to the next one. Okay, so here's how the scholarships start to look when they come in a financial aid package. The letter on the left is actually a great model letter, and I'll zoom in on these in another slide here in a second so you can see. It's available on the University of Michigan website, and they have a lot of other explanation in there too with that letter, highlighting what to look for on each of these things and what that means. So that's just a resource if you want to go do that. And then the one on the right is from one of our state universities that they very kindly provided me when I said, how can I help people better understand how to piece this together? But I've left it anonymous for now in terms of where it came from. So this, you can see how on the one on the left, they've got all the nice total costs. They've got things really broken down and explained. And then on the right, you've got to do a lot of math. So you can see where their direct costs are, what the indirect costs, but nowhere does it show you the total. And then they've broken down, this is actually from a student who's already been accepted and decided to go there and is reporting in the hometown scholarships that they've received along the way. So you can already see how those then factor into their financial aid package. Originally, that student would have only been offered the Pell Grant, tuition assistance grant, work study loan, and see how all of those are the amounts offered factored in. So you've got to help them be kind of savvy in terms of looking at what they actually need to take and what they still might want to consider getting. So go on to the next one. It got really blurry when I tried to zoom it in, but this is where you can see the difference between the gift aid. And so you can really start to use these numbers to do the math a little bit better. So helping students even have a template to start to compare their letters as you're thinking about that, as they get their, as they're completing FAFSAs now and get their SARs, they can start doing some preliminary planning and setting goals around how many scholarship dollars do I want to try and acquire? Because they can look at what their all of the costs of attendance are published. So if they know they've got their heart set on 3 schools, they could start pulling that information and saying, this is my cost there. I know I'll get this federal aid because I'll get Pell or not get Pell, and really start kind of piecing that together. We can go to the next one. And so then here I just zoomed in, you can see, again, highlighting that they just need to do more math. So I'll skip over that one. Okay, so where to find some scholarships. Ours, for example, is one of, I'd say, hundreds available through the university financial aid offices. So looking at, like at Iowa State, for example, you can go in and start through the financial aid office scholarship application and fill that out, and they can apply then for many, many, many scholarships at each institution with one application. So even though it can be daunting, it's a one-stop shop for each school. So I would strongly encourage them at a minimum to do that, and watch out for, sometimes you have to check the box that says I want to be considered for this award if you think you meet the qualifications. Again, local high school and counseling offices often have advertisements of some. I just put national website searches on here, but reminding, I think this is also common knowledge, never pay for access to scholarship information. But there's a resource too, I think that I want to show in the the preparation, I'm looking at my slide here. The preparation, I think, is stuff that Gracie's pretty much already covered. But I've heard from a lot of schools that they've started adding essay questions in like an 11th grade English class to start some of that prompting. Same thing with the interview. You already highlighted that. Gracie, I don't know if you can pull up a website really quick. I emailed it to you, but I can tell it to you. It's an easy one. It's ScholarSnap with 2 P's. .org. And this is actually a free platform for students, and they fill out all of their information into one spot, and then they can do national scholarship searches. They can do everything else. And when they say, I want to apply for this one, it'll say, do you want us to plug in your information? And you can write sample essay responses based on common topics. So they're pre-filled in there, or, here's your 500-word response to this question. And they're pre-filled. There's a really cool video that says, if you just go to like who we help at the top there, and for students, it'll show like I don't know, it's like a 1.5-minute video. Do you want to take the time to watch it? You might need to unmute.
There we go.
Oh, we can't hear it.
I'm not sure what's going on. It's unmuted on our side. Can you hear me right now, Meredith?
I can hear you, but not the video.
To share this screen.
Let's see. Share.
We can watch the video and we can hear you talk.
Let's try that. What about now?
I'm still not hearing it. But
sorry, guys. What I can do though is include the website, and the follow-up email.
That would be awesome. So like I said, they can pick like your leadership strengths or overcoming adversity or different common topics, and they can have that pre-filled in there. It is completely free to students. I'm always a little leery of this kind of stuff, but I've heard about it for a while, and I've come to know it's underwritten by the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and they have their own scholarship program called Dell Scholars. And so a lot of the technology that they've done, they've leveraged within their scholarship program, and then as part of their charitable purpose has made it available to enhance the scholarship and college affordability movement. So it isn't like it's a company trying to get students information through a back door by offering a free service or anything like that. We actually use one of their platforms internally as like the best thing I can compare it to as a student information system for our scholarship recipients. That's also created by them and funded, available at a very reasonable rate as part of their charitable mission. So they can that way also, there's a lot of common applications for scholarships that also integrates through ScholarSnap. So any of these other private scholarships students might be applying for, they can all funnel in through that ScholarSnap process. So that can be a big time saver and something really easy for students to then, proofread some things once, have those essays ready, and possibly something even too to go in and look at some other sample topics and questions to help students prepare with in those essays in 11th grade. So I guess that's kind of my highlights, but I would be happy to answer any questions too about especially having just come from that with what maybe scholarship providers are looking for, or anything else that could help you help students right now.
Awesome. And again, guys, you can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat box. All right. Meredith, that was such good information, and definitely that ScholarSnap is such a useful resource. We so appreciate you being on the webinar.
No problem.
And you can, by all means, still hang with us. There'll be more time for questions at the end of this. So if you want to hang around and see if people think of some stuff, we'd super appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Awesome. Building off of what Meredith was saying, Lori at Kennedy High created this, and I'll send it out to you guys. But it's meant to kind of help students figure out where to apply for scholarships, and starting with federal assistance, state assistance, going to your college or university, looking at your high school and what they offer, and then private internet searches, which I kind of just blew up some databases that a lot of people use. So just some places that you can search for scholarships or help students search for scholarships. And now we have Tristan here. He's going to talk to you guys about Future Ready Iowa and the Last Dollar Scholarship. So I will let him talk.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to briefly talk to you about the newest scholarship program that the state of Iowa offers. It's called the Future Ready Iowa Last Dollar Scholarship. Basically what this scholarship is it pays tuition and institution-wide fees for students to go into high-demand fields. Programs at community colleges and a couple of our private colleges in the state of Iowa. It's for degrees that are associate's degrees or lower, but they still have to qualify for Title IV funds. Basically what Title IV funds are, if they're Pell eligible or if it's a Pell eligible program, then it would qualify for the Last Dollar Scholarship. There is a long list of eligible programs out on the website, but just to give you an idea of what types of careers that we're looking at are careers that are in the medical field, electricians, welders, dental hygienists. And the Future Ready Iowa site actually breaks it down by college and by program. Or you can filter by program. So if you're interested in a certain program, or like say dental hygienist, for example, if you type in dental, it will give you all of the colleges that offer dental type programs. So as you can see, most of the community colleges in the state of Iowa offer some sort of dental program. The reason why it's called a last dollar scholarship is because it takes into consideration other federal and state assistance first. So with this scholarship, it kind of pays last, hence the name Last Dollar Scholarship. So students that are eligible for Pell Grants or any of our state funds, those are taken into account first against the tuition and institution-wide fees, and then the Future Ready Iowa Last Dollar Scholarship amount is determined. If a student's tuition and fees are already paid for by federal and state assistance, then students are guaranteed a minimum last dollar scholarship amount. If they're a full-time student, that minimum is $250 per semester. So even if their tuition and fees are paid for, they'll still get a little bit of the pie. With the Last Dollar Scholarship, there's essentially two eligible groups. Your first eligible group is going to be your high school students who've just graduated and are entering into a program as a full-time student in the fall right after their high school graduation. So even if a student graduates mid-year, they wouldn't qualify until that next fall, but it would be the fall immediately following their high school graduation. With those students, in order to remain eligible for the program, they have to stay enrolled full-time. So they at least have to be enrolled in 12 credit hours every term and be enrolled continuously in order to be eligible for the scholarship. Students are eligible for up to 8 full-time semesters for the Group 1 students that are right out of high school. There's a second eligibility group. These are for students that are the age of 20 on July 1st prior to the academic year starting. So those students for this current year were the age of 20 as of July 1st of 2019. These students have to be enrolled at least half-time, so they have to be enrolled in at least 6 credit hours, and then they're eligible for the program for, depending on whether they're full-time or part-time, the 8 full-time semesters, and then the equivalent in part-time semesters. The only application for this scholarship is the FAFSA. So as long as they're applying for the FAFSA, Iowa College Aid actually receives every FAFSA from students in the state of Iowa. So we evaluate those. We confirm graduation dates for the high school students and ages for those over the age of 20. And we basically shoot out a list to all of the community colleges or participating colleges to give them a list of potentially eligible students. And then the colleges then take that the step further, look to make sure that the student's in an eligible program, and then they determine the actual last dollar scholarship amount. So I indicated there's 2 private colleges that offer or can award the last dollar scholarship. That's Mercy College of Health Sciences here in the Des Moines Metro and St. Luke's College in the Sioux City area. Basically, these 2 schools offer associate's degree or lower programs in the medical field that are considered high demand right now. If you're interested in having some last dollar scholarship brochures or anything in your offices, you can certainly order them from our website. We have a specific brochure dedicated to the Future Ready Iowa Last Dollar Scholarship Program. And those could deem helpful as you're talking to students who are interested in going into one of those high demand fields. They, as long as they stay in the state of Iowa at one of our community colleges or those 2 private schools, then they could potentially get their tuition and institution-wide fees paid for, which is a big deal. Hopefully that helps get them into college and get them through the program, and then we can get them in those high demand careers.
I will add they get additional support from a statewide texting campaign that we are also leading, as well as potential career mentors and coaches that placed at the different community colleges. So there's some additional support systems available to those students as well.
And this is also a really good resource for like students who maybe didn't think they were going to go to college because they're like, man, I'm just going to work construction or factories. There's like welding and carpentry degrees that apply for this. So even sitting a student down and having them look at the programs that qualify for this could be really good. So what questions do you guys have? Again, unmute yourself or type in the chat box. This is super new, so don't feel like anything's a stupid question. I didn't know we had 2 private colleges on the list, so. Looks like we got one.
So this is from Crystal. Being new, I don't have most contact info. Can I get the email contact for the brochure, please?
Absolutely, I can send that out to you afterwards on the email. I'll put it out to everybody. Any other questions for Tristan? All right, thank you very much, Tristan.
No problem.
Just so you guys do know, if you have follow-up questions, he's super helpful and not at all mean. So he's always happy to answer your guys' questions. He's just a great resource for you.
And Gracie can send my email in her email.
Awesome. Thank you,
All
Tristan.
right, you're welcome.
All right, guys. So as we're talking about scholarships that are out there, Meredith had mentioned hers through her foundation, and we talked about the Future Ready Iowa Scholarship. But we also asked you guys to contribute different scholarships that you wish students knew about. And if the internet wants to work, there we go. So here are the ones that you guys came up with. And honestly, this is a great amount of scholarships. So we have the Courage to Grow Scholarship, the Iowa Newspaper Association Scholarship, Scholarship for Dreamers. And we will say that like different immigration statuses can pose difficulties with scholarships. But if you have questions about that, you can always reach out to us and we'll try to help. The Matthew Shepard Scholarship, the AFSA Scholarship, the Foreclosure Scholarship, that one I found. I always try to find these like weird ones that like you don't need GPA or anything for. And a lot of companies will put out their own scholarship to like raise awareness about what they do. So for this one, you just had to write an essay about like what you would do to flip a house essentially. And so there's no, you don't have to be a carpentry student or anything like that. But a lot of times that's just a marketing campaign for them, but it can get you, in this case, $2,500 for college. Nate had put on here workplace scholarships, which I think is a great idea. I hadn't thought of those. So if they work at Burger King or Hy-Vee or Fairway, their workplaces might have scholarships. And for you guys, all of these plus any other ones that we have that might be coming up, we'll share out to you guys in a folder so that you can share them with your students. Are there any scholarships that you guys know of or can think of that maybe isn't on here that you want to bring up? All right. Well, we're pretty much at the end of the presentation. If you guys have any final questions or any comments you want to say, again, you can unmute yourself or type them in the chat box. But we super appreciate you guys being here today. We know this can be a really confusing time, both for us as professionals and for our students. And please know that we're here to help you guys any way that we can. After this, we'll be sending out an email with an evaluation. Any resources that were brought up, like Tristan's email, the Scholar Snap that Meredith brought up, so that you guys have access to them. But if you would take the time, a couple minutes to fill out that evaluation, that would be super helpful. This digital virtual training is new for us. And so we're still trying to figure out what's the most effective way or if it's effective at all. So we'll stay here